Hi, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing part 2 of things you need to know before having a baby. And so if you like this kind of content and other homeschool content, please remember to subscribe and let's get into it. Okay, so part 1 has already gone up by the time you're seeing this video. And in part 1, I talked about all the things you need to know like right before you're having a baby. Like all the things with hospitals, with doctors, all that kind of stuff. And so I'll make sure that video is linked down below. I also explain a little bit more about my thinking behind these videos. And so if you want to know what that is, you can go check out that video. Today we're going to be talking about after baby, like directly after basically you've given birth, and things that maybe people don't talk about. They talk a lot about labor and delivery, but not necessarily all the other things that come right after you have the baby. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today, and I'm just going off of my own experiences and experiences of friends. My 6 kids, I just had a baby about 8, she's almost 9 weeks old now, 9 weeks ago, and so that's what we're sharing here today. So let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about is directly after giving birth. So what happens if you're not familiar with it, if you don't know, or maybe you've just had different experiences or had people share different experiences with you. I just wanted to share what my experience was with 6 kids. So obviously you're going to deliver the placenta afterwards. And there is delayed cord clamping if you tell them you want to do that. Most, I feel like, do that nowadays. It's become a little bit more standard, and what it means is they just wait till your placenta and the cord stops pulsing, because there's a fair amount of blood that's the baby's that's in your placenta. And so if you let it stop pulsing, the blood has a chance to go back in the baby, and sometimes it leads to less issues with some like belly rubin, you know, with jaundice and things like that. And so you just tell them, so you have the baby, you can have skin to skin if you want, and so they'll just put the baby directly on you, which is really good for you and for the baby, for that connection between you. So with my last baby, my cord was pretty short, so she actually sat a lot lower on my abdomen for a while until it stopped pulsing, and then my placenta was delivered and we cut the cord and all that kind of stuff. So depending on how long your cord is, they might not be able to be clear up here. They might have to sit down lower, but those are a few of the options that you can have with that. And then they will check for tears if you need like stitches or anything. So with my first 4, I did tear. My first one, you know, it was a little bit more expected just because it's my first baby, and I have pretty large babies. He was almost 9 pounds, my first one, and all my other ones have been between 8.5 and 9.5 pounds. So it's a little bit like I was expecting it a little bit. So at that point, I had an epidural where I was completely numb, and I explained about epidurals in the other video a little bit more. And so afterwards, when I was getting stitched up, I couldn't feel anything. So if you haven't had an epidural, or if like I had some walking epidurals when we lived in Connecticut, they do local anesthetic after, because otherwise you could feel everything and that wouldn't be pleasant. And so it still isn't pleasant, okay, getting stitched up down there, not pleasant at all. But my next 3, I tore with as well. I don't think I would have torn with my 4th, except she put her hand by her face, that little stinker. And so when she was born, it was like a weird tear because her hand was by her face. And then my last 2, I didn't tear at all. And they were still pretty big babies. My 6th baby was 9 pounds, like almost on the dot. And I didn't tear at all with either of them. And I think it's partially due to my previous 3, the epidural relaxed me so much that I went from 6 to having a baby, like 6 centimeters, to having a baby in 10 minutes. Like, no joke. It was very, very fast. And so my body didn't have time to adjust. Whereas these last 2 were natural. I didn't have an epidural. And so my body was adjusting a little bit more. They still came fairly quickly, but I had time to adjust, so I didn't tear. Which was nice. I was so glad both times when they're like, you didn't tear. And I was like, phew, because that's like one of my least favorite parts. Like my first baby, it was so nice being completely numb and not feeling anything. And then I have my next 2. Sorry, my hair is, if you've been around here, you know how much I love having my hair down. I don't. and it's hot. And so anyways, it was just nice not being able to feel anything when they stitched it up. And the next ones, you're still numb to like pain, but pressure, not so much. And so that kind of stuff, or tugging, you can feel, and it just is like makes me cringe just thinking about it. So those are just a few things right after. I've never had any sort of emergencies going on with baby or with me, so I don't have any insights to that. I've had a few friends that did hemorrhage. My sister did with her first baby. And then, you know, they're okay, but it was a traumatizing experience for them. And one of my friends had five kids, and the fifth one was the one she hemorrhaged. She didn't want any more kids. My sister's was her first, and she had 3 more kids after that. And they learned how to control her hemorrhaging because it's just her uterus wasn't very good at contracting back down. And so they figured it out with the doctors of how to do that, and everything went fine after that. So there's some different experiences. Again, I don't personally have any of those types of experiences, but there are plenty of people that do. So if you're wanting to know about those, I'm sure you could find someone to ask about those kinds of things and what you could do in those types of situations. Something else I wanted to mention is stool softeners. So when you're in the hospital, I don't know if they do this at like birthing centers and stuff, but in the hospital, they will give you a stool softener with like pain meds or whatever else you're taking, because especially with my first, it was really hard to go to the bathroom afterwards, really difficult, and it doesn't feel very good. And if you've tore, like that doesn't feel very good and stuff. I didn't realize how much tearing like hurt. Okay, and I quickly recover from giving birth until I didn't tear on my last 2. And then I was like, wow, this is so different. And I didn't even like realize how different it was until I didn't tear. But it just is not super fun to go to the bathroom. It did get easier with all like my next kids, but I would recommend taking a stool softener or having something even before you go into labor, like the week before, so that your body's already kind of prepared for that. And then they will give you some, or you can take your own, or whatever method you like to use for that, and it'll just be so much easier and a lot less painful, and you'll feel better too, because then you don't always want to go to the bathroom when it hurts, but you also need to, so it's just uncomfortable. And with all the other discomforts, you don't need that discomfort. So take the stool softener and maybe a few days before, and also in the hospital. Okay, something else that I wanted to mention that I don't personally have tons of advice about is handling all the pain and soreness and stuff like that. I have mentioned before in my past birthing videos how I quickly recover from having babies. And my pain tolerance is pretty darn high, and so, which isn't always a good thing, okay? I almost died when I was 11 because of it, so it's not always a good thing. But I just feel pretty good afterwards. And yes, I will be a little bit sore, and I was more sore when I tore than when I didn't. But I never really had problems with sitting down. I know some, you have to sit down very slowly, like it's painful and all that kind of stuff. Even when you take a shower, there's like those little donut blow-ups. Again, I've never used any of these things, so I don't have specific advice about this. I know there's different products and they'll offer you a bunch too in the hospital, and I'm sure midwives will at birthing centers and stuff like that you can use. I have never used them. Like I'll use the ice they offered that first few hours after I've had the baby. But then after that, I actually feel pretty good, and I'll take a few painkillers, usually on the like 2nd day, and maybe a few times after that. But I just feel really good and don't experience pain in that way. And so I don't have a ton of advice for all of that, but I know there are a lot of resources out there, and even just talking to your doctor or your midwife or whoever, they can help you out and give you a lot of things that will help with that discomfort. And then just take it easy, like listen to your body. I'm one of those people that I'm just up and going afterwards, and some people need to just rest longer, and that's okay. And that works for some people. For me, if I just lay in my bed for weeks and recover, that's very depressing for me and would be worse for my healing than getting up and moving around. But then something else along with all of that is you will be bleeding for several weeks and you'll have to wear pads or whatever. I've always just did the like orange, always like overnight pads, the extra long ones. I never needed anything thicker once I've left the hospital. And so I just always use those, and usually I bleed for like 3 weeks. Sometimes it will start, sorry, I have like this hair that's driving me crazy in my mouth. Sometimes it will start a little bit again and not, and it can depend on your physical activity. And so if you are up and moving a whole lot, then you might start to bleed more. So like pay attention to those things because it might mean you need to take it easy. But then also this last time I actually had my birth control prescribed to me when I was still in the hospital, and that's the first time that's ever happened. And so I started taking it like 3 weeks after I had the baby instead of waiting until my 6-week checkup and then taking it. And so that also caused some bleeding to start again, but just very minimal, just as my body was adjusting to that, and then it stopped. And so total, it was maybe 4 weeks. You know, it gets kind of annoying at the end because it just comes and goes and you're just never sure. You think you're done and then you're not done, and it's kind of annoying. But just know, like, there is gonna be bleeding, so be prepared for that. And it's gonna last a while. And so make sure you have plenty of products so you don't have to worry about getting all that kind of stuff. Okay, the next thing I wanted to mention is things for baby. So obviously they'll weigh baby afterwards, after they're born, all those kinds of things. But then a lot of places, like the hospital in Connecticut, we had babies, and even the one I just had my babies here in Utah, encourage a lot more of the baby being in the room with you as much as humanly possible. I think they used to have a nursery, like for my first baby that was born in a different hospital in Utah, they had the nursery and they're like, oh yeah, send him here. And obviously if you're super tired and really struggling, then yes, ask for some help. But they don't always have that resource, and so the baby is in your room so that you can establish that connection with them. So there is that aspect of it, but then there's also some different vaccines and things available for the baby. You choose whether or not you want these things done. I think in almost every hospital that I've gone to with every doctor, they ask before you even, like if you're not in crazy labor when you go in, I've been induced, but if you go in and you know, in crazy labor, they'll probably ask you afterwards. But they'll ask you if you want to do the Hep B vaccine can be started at that age, and then they'll do the shots as they get a little bit older, the rest of them, because I think it's a series of 3 shots, is Hep B 3, I think so. And then there's an eye cream that helps with like some eye infections or anything like that, any bacteria that may have gotten there. And then vitamin K is also an option, which helps with blood clotting. So there's different options, and you can say no if you don't want them done at that time. If you don't want them done at all, like it's totally fine for you to say, no, I don't want these done. And so those are just a few things that might come up that they might ask you about the baby that would be good for you to be informed about beforehand so you can know how you want to respond to those questions. There's also the question of having the baby get a bath in the hospital. And it wasn't even until recently that I even knew that there was kind of mixed ideas about this, because when the baby's born, they're white, right? They have this white coating on them, the vernix that's on them, and it's protecting their skin. It's like moisturizing it and all these different things. So the sooner you give them a bath, the sooner that coating goes away and that protection goes away. It's not saying keep it on forever, right? But some would say wait several days before you actually give them a bath and clean that all off. So they will ask you in the hospital if you want the baby to have a bath. Some places will bathe the baby in the room with you if you're not comfortable with them taking the baby to the nursery. Every place is a little bit different. And if you don't want the baby to have a bath in the hospital, you can tell them that also. I think all of my kids, except maybe my 5th, didn't have a bath in the hospital. And I can't remember exactly why with him, why that happened, but for some reason it didn't. And then with my last one, I think it was like it was close to 24 hours after she was born that they did a bath. And part of it is because they forgot. Anyways, so there's different ideas about that. So again, if it is something that matters to you, that concerns you, do some research, decide ahead of time what you want to do, if you want them to have a bath or if you want to take them home and you get to be the first one to give them like a bath, then that's totally fine also. Okay, I wanna mention just a couple things about nursing. I have nursed all of my babies until about 6 months. I am pretty intense about sleep training. I don't like do it in a cry it out sort of way. I just establish routines and stuff. And so a lot of times by the time my babies are sleeping 12 hours at night, which is usually around 4 months, and then they start solid food around 6 months, between 4 to 6 months, I have a very low milk supply. If I'm just exclusively nursing, I have tons and tons of milk. But as soon as that's not the case and you combine those two things of them sleeping really well and eating food, then my milk quickly goes away. I think one child I made it to 8 months and there was just really not much milk for her. She was like mad and finally took a bottle. And I've always, she was the only one that I struggled with getting her to take a bottle. All my other kids, at least once a week, I would give them a bottle, so I'd pump and give them a bottle, excuse me. And a lot of insurances will pay for you to get like your first breast pump or one every so many years. And my midwife told me about it and gave me like the little prescription for it that you can go on to your website and for your insurance, and that, you know, show them that and everything and pick which one you want. And some of them you have to pay extra if you want certain ones and stuff like that. But so I will pump and then I can feed them. My kids can feed them now that my kids are older. My husband will feed them. It's also just, if I need to go somewhere, I don't have to feel like extremely tied to the schedule of the baby. And then I'll, you know, come back and pump or whateve. And then this baby, she's taken a bottle almost every single morning, just because I've been pumping and keeping half of what I pump in the freezer for when I do run out of milk. And so she gets the other half in a bottle almost every single morning, and she's been totally fine and chill about it. So there's that whole aspect of it, the pumping, everything like that. And again, I don't like to just have my babies only nurse. I like them to be able to take a bottle just in case we need them to. And then just nursing in general is painful at the beginning. Okay, it's uncomfortable. This is one of those things, you know, along with just all the discomfort of healing down there after birth, nursing is also just uncomfortable. And everything, you get engorged, and you know, the baby trying to nurse, and you don't want anyone touching you. You can't, you know, you're already not sleeping, but then you can't like touch yourself. Even your arms, like touching your sides is painful. There's just all these different things that are painful. And then making sure the baby's latch is good, which they will check in the hospital. There's a lot of lactation specialists and like opportunities for you to be able to receive help that way. So if you're struggling, first time mom, multiple time mom, they have resources for that. And so all of my kids, the initial start of nursing is always just a shock. Like it's just a little, even when their latch is really good and stuff, it just is not comfortable. And so it takes a few weeks for me to like kind of get in a groove, for me and baby to get into a groove and all that kind of stuff. And then it's not so bad anymore. And I get used to it, and it's normal, not painful, all these different things. I do like to wear like nursing pads for the first like couple months during the, like all the time. And then usually at night, just because if they miss a feeding or something, then I don't want to wake up soaking wet and then have to go change, because that's not fun. And so we'll link the ones I like down below. I can't remember, I don't know how to say the name. It's like the purple box and the name starts with an L and it's very weird. Anyways, those are the ones I've always used. I've tried some more like washable type ones, and I don't really love them, because when I need the pads the most is when I start leaking through or, you know, miss feeding or something like that. And those, I just leak through them, right? They get full because they're just cloth, and I leak through them. So I need something with like a plastic barrier on the back of it so that I'm not drenched. So there's that. I know this is all the stuff you just didn't want to know, but you need to know. You do want to know it, but it's also weird. But people don't tell you all these things. So there's all those types of things with nursing. There's also just some illnesses that can come if things get clogged and things. Again, I've never struggled with that, so I can't say how it goes. I know a lot of people get antibiotics and it goes away quickly and then they're fine. But just so you're aware, there are illnesses, like you can get a little bit sick sometimes if things clog up and aren't working properly. So if you aren't feeling well, if you're running a fever, go to the hospital, get it checked out to make sure it's okay. And one last thing I want to mention about nursing, since my babies are pretty big, I just don't have enough colostrum, which is like the initial milk. It's like more thick and creamy and that you produce before your actual milk comes in, which is like 3 to 5-ish days after the baby is born. And since I don't produce a lot, my babies are really big, I supplement with formula, usually in the hospital, and for the first few days till my milk comes in. So I still have them nurse, so they're simulating milk production, but then I will give them some formula so that I don't have a super grumpy baby, because believe me, they will be grumpy and screaming. So if you're running into that, maybe if you have smaller babies, I don't know, I've never had a small baby, so I don't know if this is an issue for people with smaller babies, but my babies, like after that first day, if I'm not giving them something more than just nursing them, like they will just scream almost constantly because they are starving. And so I am fine with giving them formula because I want them to be happy, I want them to be fed and not be super grumpy. And I know some people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you do that, like nursing is enough, but sometimes it's not enough, okay? And people need to know that it's okay if you have to give them a little bit of formula so that they will be happy and full the first few days of their life until your milk comes in. And sometimes it takes a little longer for your milk to come in than it might somebody else. And so then they might just be really hungry. And I'm not gonna let my baby starve because someone thinks it's only nursing is okay and that you can't give them formula. So that's what I've done with all my babies, and with each one I'm like, they're just so much happier. The sooner I give them formula, the sooner we're all happier and sleep better, and it's just much better. Okay, so I just have 2 things left that I wanted to mention. The first thing is leaving the hospital after 24 hours. And I didn't know about this with my first, which again, with your first, you just chill out in the hospital, really, like, you know, with the other ones, I had kids all at home. I had friends watching my kids. Like my husband couldn't really be with us because he'd come one until I delivered, but then he had to go get our kids from friends because we didn't live by family. So it was like this whole thing. And so with my second, I found out, oh, you can leave the hospital after 24 hours, you know, because they do a 24-hour check of the baby. So that's why 24 hours, they wait till that point usually, do all their tests and stuff to make sure they are doing well, that their bilirubin is normal, they don't have to be under lights or anything. And then they'll let you go home as long as pediatrician's okay and your doctor okays it, then you're good to go. And but she was born pretty late at night, like 8 or 9. So by the time we would have finished all that and gotten checked out, it would have been like 11 before we got home. So we stayed. And then my third child, we were planning on doing that, but then his bilirubin was not going well. And so he had to be under lights the whole second night. So if we had checked out, we would have just had to come back to the hospital. So we stayed with him. But then the next 3, we did get out after like at the 24-hour mark basically, and came home. And I really like that. I know some people like staying in the hospital longer because they're not all by their, like all their other kids and stuff like that. But I just like to come home, be in a routine. And a lot of times the nurses, if you tell them, they'll respect like not waking you up, because I know some people, they want to get out of the hospital because they can't sleep in the hospital, which is still sort of true even when they don't wake you up. But if you tell them that, I feel like my last 4 were very, very good about being aware of that. And even with my last one, she would open the door, I think every couple hours, but if I wasn't awake feeding the baby, she would just let me sleep. There was only like 1 check that she had to come in and do at like 2 a.m. and nothing else she needed to do until the next morning. And so she just let me sleep. If we were both asleep, she'd just leave us alone. So voice that to the nurses, tell them you don't want to be woken up. And a lot of times they will not need to wake you up, okay? They don't have to all the time. And so that's something to be aware of, but you can get out after 24 hours as long as everything is good, because you don't want to have to be coming back to the hospital for problems for you or the baby. Okay, and the final thing I wanted to mention is exercise after having a baby. And this is gonna look a little different again for everyone. It also depends on, you know, how active you were before pregnancy, during pregnancy, how labor and delivery went, all that kind of stuff, and then how you're feeling afterwards. Like obviously most of the time it's like wait till your 6-week checkup and for you to be cleared to exercise. But I have always started doing some sort of light exercise, usually around 3 or 4 weeks. I kind of pay attention to my body. There's been a few times I've started exercising sooner, started bleeding a little bit more, so then I cut back and didn't. But even just going on a walk is really nice. Like just getting out and moving just a little bit is really nice for your body. So just pay attention to how everything's going. And I feel like if you were working out before and everything went smoothly with labor and delivery, then exercising like sooner, you know, still like a month after baby is at least more feasible. At least it has been for me, than if you weren't exercising at all. But again, I encourage walking. Like I think walking is still very good and good to get up and move around if you're doing no other exercise. I think walking is really good. Okay, so those are all my thoughts about what you need to know about after having your baby, like almost directly after having your baby. I hope it was helpful. I hope you maybe learned something that you didn't know, or if you're about to have a baby, hopefully this is helpful for you and you're like, okay, this was really good to know. And if you have other questions, something more specific or whatever, make sure to put it down in the comments because I can make another video if you guys have enough questions for me to do that. And remember to give this video a thumbs up and I will see you next time.